Well, over the summer, fires were the big topic, as they often are in the warmer months in Australia. But this year there was a difference. This summer the conversation quickly turned from devastation to one about politics. And the language was relentless. Phrases like unprecedented and worst ever constantly repeated, all of which bear little factual relevance to previous bushfire history. No matter where you are in the climate debate, what I hope we all can agree on is the extraordinary effort of our volunteer firefighters who downed tools, left families and jobs and joined a mammoth firefighting campaign effort this summer. And it wasn't just those who wear the uniform. It was surf club volunteers who provided shelter, the CWA who fed the weary, and the countless other service groups that supported Australians at their lowest ebb. You hear this a lot, but it can't ever be said enough. We are a nation of volunteers, but if you look carefully at their ranks, many of our volunteers are ageing, and I often ask myself, who will follow them when these selfless generations of baby boomers and Gen Xers retire? One positive from a summer of strife is that more of us want to step up. So what does it take to train up and face the walls of fire we've seen on our televisions over the past few months? And who are these extraordinary men and women in our volunteer brigades across the country? This special tonight is about answering the questions you have put to me about just that, with former Prime Minister Tony Abbott and his colleagues at the Davidson Rural Fire Brigade. In his time as a politician, and certainly when I worked for him when he was a party leader, Tony Abbott always regarded his commitment to the Davidson crew to be as important as anything else he did in Canberra. It's been this summer's almost nationwide focus. Indeed, it's gone global. Devastating bushfires, lives lost, and thousands of properties across Australia destroyed. The imagery's been impossible to forget. Communities torn apart, firefighters left exhausted, and our much-loved and iconic wildlife hit the hardest. But despite the political debates that have raged as fiercely as the fires, the Australian spirit is stronger than ever. And the tragedy, well, it's cemented firefighters, our volunteers, at the heart of our nation's identity. Put this summer into context. What has it been like for you and the brigade and the tempo of the call-outs this year as opposed to other years?
It's been busy. It's been arduous.
It's been frantic, mate.
It's been frantic. It's been arduous is probably the right word to use for it. For us, it started in mid-August around here. We were sending crews up to the north coast. I think our first deployment was to the Drake Fire, and we had one of our appliances tasked up on the north coast until the 19th of December. And as soon as it arrived back at station, we stripped it, cleaned it, serviced it, and it was back out in the field the next day with Go Saving Properties. So it's been a very hectic year. I've been a member for 26 years. It's been the longest, certainly, and most intense that I've seen in my career as a volunteer. So yeah, it's been a season that'll go down in history, I think, for us.
Davidson Rural Fire Brigade on Sydney's northern beaches is one of many services operating across the country, full of ordinary people doing extraordinary things. You've been a member for 26 years. You joined when you were 16. What did you think of this bloke when he turned up, 20 years ago? Did you think he'd be one of those politicians who want it for their CV?
Well, I'd been around 6 years, so that would have made me early 20s. We were a little bit sceptical. From day one has always just been Tony, one of the members, pulls the uniform on, and even to the day that when I bring new members into our fold, when they want to join, one of the conversations I have is we have everybody in this organisation from a former Prime Minister right the way through to school students, and they absolutely judge how they attend and how they participate with us when they wear the uniform, certainly not what they do outside of the uniform.
I know the Fire Brigade's been such a feature of your life. I know that Trent Dowling's name in the office was as important as anybody else's, and it was a priority to be here for your training. Why have you kept it up?
It's become a very important part of my life, Peter, and it's a wonderful way to serve the community. Margie always used to say to me, look, you go down to Canberra and you become unpopular, you go up to the fire brigade and you become popular, or at least relatively speaking, because everyone appreciates that there's no politics and there's no partisanship when the community is in trouble, and that's when the fire brigade comes into its own.
Don't you say that, you know, on the back of big episodes, there's a response rate from the community about joining up. How many can you take, and do people turn up on the back of, I guess, you know, a difficult summer, appear interested, but that falls away?
Look, across the board, the community outcry to assist in some way, shape or form has been immense. I think where a campaign or a season like this is best for the interest level for the service is the country towns and the regional areas of New South Wales, where it may spark an interest, where they'll get 10 or 15 new members and nearly double the size of their organisation out there.
Over the last decade, Australia has suffered a 10% decline in the number of volunteer firefighters. But on the back of this horror bushfire season, brigades are reporting an increase in inquiries. For those already fronting up on the front line, they are encouraged that more of us want to get involved. I think it's important to tell the story about volunteer fire brigades, particularly after this summer, and get behind the veil a little bit, because we see you in the middle of all the smoke and the risk, but it's now an important time to talk about how others can get involved in some way. Interesting, I've got two people here that weren't born in Australia, but joined up because you felt it was the Australian thing to do.
This has obviously been the worst fire season in New South Wales that anyone can remember. I've certainly had the fiercest fire days in my experience. But again, when you're trained and you're equipped, you're kind of mentally and physically prepared for all of this. And then I suppose the comradeship and the adrenaline takes over, and you just do whatever is required to do.
Want to get involved in something with the community, you know, make some friends and stuff like that. Just love everything about it.
Ben, you're an American, and you're young.
Yep.
Lots of other things you could join here, but you've come to the fire brigade.
Oh, I mean, it's the right thing to do, and you know, there's a big sense of camaraderie, and yeah, it's, I guess, a sense of duty, and you know, wherever you are in the world, it's always good to do the right thing. So.
You watch the imagery, you see it's generally older men in fire brigades, and one of the challenges that keeps coming up in the debate about volunteerism is what do we do when the current crop of volunteers start to move on? But when you and Rory are young, certainly young in my book, what do your mates think about you being in the fire brigade?
I think a lot of my friends don't understand it at all. Yeah. They just think you must be a maniac if you're going out and risking your life.
So what made you do it?
Well, my house is right in the bush, and I thought if there was a bushfire that came through, I want someone to help me out. And the best opportunity I've had with the RFS is to go to these remote places where nobody else is there and helping them out. I was in Silent Grove, and there was this woman's house. It wasn't really a house, it was just a shack. And it was in the middle of the bush, and a whole group of people from Sydney came and saved her house. And I just hope that something like that makes a difference. And
how did that make you feel?
It was one of the best feelings I've ever felt in my life, and I've never felt more proud than I have that day. Yeah, we're pretty tough on young people sometimes, Roy. I'm pretty tough on millennials for skiving off and, you know, not putting their shoulder in. But, you know, you both are sending me a lesson that, you know, we're all got to do a bit more.
Yeah, we do. And, you know, as you're talking about, you know, what do your mates think? I mean, all my mates are here around this group here.
There was a wonderful moment, Peter, when our strike team pulled up in Milton to refill after a day on the south coast a couple of weeks back, and the lady who ran the pub rushed out to say, look, can we give you a cup of coffee? Can we feed you? So we said, oh, well, sure you can, but it's not just us. There's 5 more trucks that are going to turn up in a minute. So we all walked in. They fed us. They couldn't have done more for us. And then as we were walking out, every single patron stood and applauded. And, you know, it was a very moving moment, very, very moving.
Clearly, these acts of community kindness resonate, coming from towns and communities that have suffered so much. There's been a lot of talk about your commitment, But I think we can't forget employers in all of this, because it's a big loss for them to lose their workforce, particularly in country towns and areas where a good portion of people will be out on the truck.
I've got a very supportive employer, and my team around me, they will contribute and they will continue to help while I'm not there. They'll cover for me basically. And without that, it's very difficult to get time off.
Many of these people have sacrificed a great deal, spending weeks or months away from paid jobs, their farms or small businesses. And the questions around funding allocated to firefighting services across the country, well, that's become part of the national conversation. Just tell us a little bit about how you fund a building like this. I know that the responsibility, Trent, for the financials comes from the state government. They fund our brigades around the country. But I know you do a lot of fundraising yourselves here at Davidson. Tell me the difference between what you fundraise for and what's supplied by the government.
There's additional pieces of equipment that we have fundraised for to raise and purchase that will help us do what we do a little bit better. They include things like storm damage pole saws for cutting branches out of trees. Those kind of pieces of equipment are additional. They're not funded. And this is across the country in different volunteer organisations, whether it's a Bunnings barbecue, or in our case we have a street which engages in a Christmas display where we raise money through that.
Fiona, you've got the toughest job in the place, because you've been operational. Now you're responsible for putting together the rosters. It's a big brigade, but making sure you can man all your vehicles and potentially, I'm told, man other vehicles in other stations where they mightn't have the manpower.
Yeah, so we have an active membership of just over 100 people, and the trucks that we have, we can only fill 13 spots. So it's being able to manage the people effectively, as well as putting the correct skill sets onto the trucks.
I've got to go to you, Tony Abbott. I mean, one of the many rules in the office, we were never allowed to use the term volunteer and the professional fire brigade. You pulled us up and said we're all professionals. They're careerists or they're salaried. We're volunteers, but never use that distinction. Well, it's always stuck with me.
There was once a tendency for the paid staff, the paid service, to look down on the volunteer service, but there is a high level of professionalism in both the Rural Fire Service amongst the volunteers, and obviously New South Wales Fire and Rescue with the paid career staff. And I've been really impressed on the fire ground this summer, Peter, at the comradeship, not just within the service, but between the services.
Australian firefighters are world class, and the safety equipment needs to reflect this. Currently, trucks are fitted out with water sprayers, breathing apparatus, heat-protected curtains and blankets. When it comes to the technology, high-tech navigation systems are helping to save lives. Now, this truck's diesel. I'm told that the fleet in New South Wales is basically now all diesel. There was a horrific fire, I remember, in Victoria, probably 15, 20 years ago now. Might even be more. The trucks were petrol, and the tank evaporated, and that contributed to loss of life for the firefighters. So this is where technology, isn't it, Graham, is so important?
Well, every time there is a big incident like this, the critical review brings in new technology. What we've learnt since the 1994 fires is that we've got a tremendous injection of funding and professionalism since then. As
firefighters continue to put their lives on the line, the debate about whether we could do more to support them continues. Okay, let's touch some of the difficult subjects that have been thrown up by the fires. Tony Abbott, the Prime Minister really wants to see a debate about should there be more national powers available to a national government. He's saying, look, I've been on the hook this summer. The national government has been part of what the community is now demanding in terms of a national response. Up until then, you know better than anyone, it's been a state-based jurisdiction. Should there be more national involvement, and what should that look like?
Yeah, look, this is a fair question, and obviously, Peter, this summer of crisis after crisis has brought it on. My own view, for what it's worth, is that if there is a natural disaster that is contained within the boundaries of any one state, it probably still should be left to the Premier. If, on the other hand, as we've seen this year, because fires don't respect state boundaries, they are disasters that cross borders, well, obviously someone has got to be in charge, and I suppose it makes sense that that person is the Prime Minister.
All right, hazard reduction burns has also been a hot topic. Trent, 26 years, have you seen the change in the fuel load as you've been out there?
But look, hazard reduction is an important part of what we do. Australia is designed to burn. Way before we all turned up here and colonised Australia, it was burning for thousands and thousands of years. I think that's what we need to understand, that a regular fire regime is something that is part of our ecology and part of our country.
Yeah, there's a big difference, isn't there, between the rules for burning and actually getting the burning done, the bureaucracy that gets involved. Tony, you know bureaucracy better than anyone. Have we let the bureaucracy run fuel reduction burn protocols?
When you're on deployment, you get lots of complaints from farmers that they can't clear their land, they can't burn their land, they can't manage their land in the way that they'd like, and that's what they say, and I have no reason to think that it isn't getting more difficult. On the other hand, as Trent says, you certainly don't want to go and haphazardly burn everything all the time, because we are a country that is heavily settled and we've got to look after the environment as well as live in it.
With a number of their fellow firefighters, as we know, killed this summer, you can prepare and train, but the risk remains real. You can admit on national TV if you want. Ben, do you get scared?
Oh, never. I'm never scared. I think you know, there's certain points when obviously the adrenaline hits, but I think mostly it's the adrenaline hits and you're worried about your mates, and you just kind of get on with the jobs.
Do you think this will be something you do like these blokes for a good part of your adult life?
I can't imagine life without it now. There's 2 generations in my family, my dad and myself in the RFS, and we've got people in this brigade 3 generations, even 4, and I want to be one of those families which is like that, because it's the best organisation I've ever joined and it has such an impact on your life. I can't imagine anything without it.